Welcome to the ACC Panic Room alongside Lauren Brownlow. I'm Joe Ovius. Kind of a weird day in the ACC with some matinee basketball sprinkled in a little hockey, and then a game that North Carolina didn't have scheduled originally ends up getting scheduled so they can at least play some basketball with the scheduling flux in the ACC. And then we saw Duke's first game without Jalen Johnson. There's a lot to take in. Where do you want to start, Brownlow?
Oh, I mean, we could go in order. I have a weird compulsion about things like that. We
Oh,
could
is this
just do
like
that.
is this like a dinner plate? Like you just have to do in compartments?
Oh, I don't eat dinner that way.
Okay, I was
But
gonna say you're not a psycho, right?
but like when I well, debatable, I suppose. But when I break down games or whatever, like I tend to try to go in order. It's just a weird
Fair enough.
compulsion I have. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, so let's start with the NC State game against Pitt. Comes down to the wire. It looked like NC State was going to do an unfortunate thing there with a turnover, but they come out of it with a win. Kind of an even matchup against the Pitt team that's been very similar to NC State this season. Desperate for a win, maybe trying to cling on to an NCAA title, NCAA tournament hope, but it goes NC State's way. I guess it was a good feel win for them on the road, no less.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, and this is probably related, they played well in the first half. They started playing well, like right from the jump, and they found themselves in a position to win. And that's usually,
Where have we seen this before?
yeah, in other basketball games, I feel like,
Yeah.
you
But I
know?
guess that's the thing. I mean, sometimes just it doesn't matter how it happens. You just got to go out there and get a win. I've heard the coaching staff talk about this in the past. It doesn't really matter how it happens. They just want to get the W and feel good about it and then move on. And if you're NC State with the way that things have been going this year, as especially after their game against Duke, which that game was essentially over midway through the first half on Saturday, you'll take it where you can get it at this point.
Yeah, and it was nice to see them smiling. And for a minute, it looked like it wasn't going to happen for them. And I
Sure.
was like, I tweeted this too, but I'm like, look, I don't root, but this would be too much. Like this, they don't deserve to lose this game this
What,
way.
another
Like
one?
it's too much for them to just like, yeah, cough this one up down the stretch. It's too much to put on this group. And yeah, I guess the practice plan with Braxton Beverly seems to be working too. And he's playing a little fewer minutes, getting a lighter workload. He's been way more effective when he's in there. And the
Right.
freshmen played well. Cam Hayes, Shaquille Moore, like they played well. And DJ Funderburk, congrats to him, got his second assist of the year. Listen, this is not a knock on DJ Funderburk, as we all know, because we've watched NC State play. Like, it's not as if,
Yeah.
a lot of his touches are coming in transition off offensive rebounds and the like, right?
Hmm.
So I get it. And you want him scoring. It's fine. It's just a statistical oddity for me. Like, I literally combed through every other ACC roster to see if anyone else had played over 100 minutes and had like that low of an assist rate. They don't. He's got that on lockdown. So and even Keats was like kind of roasting him for it after
Oh,
the game.
Keats will do that. Keats will absolutely do that to his players, just for giggles. So, moving to the North Carolina Northeastern game, this game essentially was a "you up" tweet, DM or whatever to get a basketball game played because of the Miami rescheduling or the postponement of the Miami game, which is likely not going to happen. And we went over the whole maskless party thing. But the problem that North Carolina faces and why this game ends up happening and why it might happen again, we'll get to that in a second, is because the ACC's schedule has just become an absolute mess. ACC announced today before their tip-off against Northeastern that the game against Boston College next week has been postponed because of Boston College's COVID pause. Louisville goes into their fourth COVID pause this season. That game against Syracuse got postponed later today, or
They
essentially,
weren't off their COVID pause, though, I don't think, or were they?
I guess I've honestly, I've lost track
I
of
think that they were
who's
still on the COVID pause and they
I
were about to come off it, and then they got a new
a new
positive.
situation. Okay, that makes sense. But that puts Saturday's game in jeopardy, I would
Yep.
imagine, even though the ACC, when they released their schedule today, did not postpone Saturday's contest. But at the rate things are going, I just don't see that game playing. So I think you're looking at the possibility of North Carolina with this Northeastern game having only played a game, like one game in 3 weeks at
Yeah, I
this
mean,
point.
I think that it's likely to me anyway. And I know I get it. I know North Carolina wants to play home games, but I think they are going to have to make a decision about, especially if they lose the Louisville game, whether or not they want to add a game that's going to be a Q1, a quadrant one, as
Yeah.
we all know, the wonderful quadrant system we have. If they want to add a game that's going to be a quadrant one game, they're going to have a bigger pool to choose from, so to speak, if they
Sure.
go and do it on the road.
I'm with
I
you
know
on
they
this
don't want
because
to.
right, but you have to play basketball at some point,
Well,
and that's and that
yeah,
because NC State faced that issue earlier in the season. That's how they ended up at St. Louis, and they lose that game. But it was just a matter of playing basketball. And I know that Roy Williams, after the game, he was doing the classic Roy Williams thing where he doesn't understand like how Twitter works. Theoretically, he called it tweeter, twit, or whatever it is. But he did say he was like, if I got to go back on Twitter
mm-hmm.
again to go schedule a game, he'll go and do it. Although I suggested maybe what you do is you go look at like the Instagram account of another college basketball team and you just like a photo from like several months ago, and then maybe they'll notice, like,
Yeah,
oh,
maybe, yeah.
what's
I
what's
mean,
what's up with North Carolina? Some people have suggested like maybe you go like stalk them on LinkedIn, stalk the program on LinkedIn a little bit.
yeah,
It's
maybe.
like, hey, we should connect. Maybe get some coffee outdoors somewhere.
Because here's the other part of this too. Like, I think Carolina only lost one road game, if I'm not mistaken, and
I'd have to go
it's the
back and
Notre Dame
look.
game, and
Yeah.
that was like a while ago. I think maybe they were supposed to play Notre Dame. I don't know. I can't keep track anymore.
Mm.
But technically, I suppose they could have played at Notre Dame since Notre Dame lost their game. But whatever, it's irrelevant. That would have been a Q1, by the way, if they had done that this week.
Mm-hmm.
But I was looking at Clemson and Virginia Tech's schedule, and there's just really not a lot out there in terms of where they could squeeze those games in to make them up. In terms of those two teams coming to Chapel Hill, there's no room for Virginia Tech really, and there's a little bit of room maybe for Clemson, but not really. And so,
Yeah.
I think at this point they're probably going to have to, go outside the ACC and see what they can find and
They're
maybe think
also
outside the box.
Also, North Carolina, along with Duke, they're both teams that are on the outside looking in for the NCAA tournament, or looking for any little help that they can get to make the NCAA tournament. And while
Well,
I think that Duke and North Carolina, with all this talk about the ACC tournament and whether or not it's going to happen or how many teams are going to participate, I'm at the point where these two teams, Duke and North Carolina, are going to participate in the ACC tournament, whether it's 8
oh yeah,
teams, 10 teams, 5 teams, it doesn't matter. They want to play
yeah,
because plus the ACC has to determine how they want to go about the automatic qualifier, who gets the auto bid from the ACC, because I know the NCAA over the weekend said, look, it's up to the conference to determine how they want to determine their auto bids. It could be the regular season champ, it could be your conference champ. Meanwhile, like I know Jim Phillips just took over as the commissioner of the ACC, but have we heard from Jim Phillips?
not that I'm aware of.
Okay, I'm just curious. I mean, who's minding the store right now? I mean, it's odd to me that we're about 3 weeks away from the start of the ACC tournament, and we don't really seem to have a good idea of what that thing is going to look like as more and more postponements stack up. And there's going to be teams that have had so many pauses that the last thing they're going to want to do is chance it to go to the ACC tournament in Greensboro.
Yeah, I mean, Boston College should probably just pause and delete the remainder of their season in the first place. Um, but yeah, I mean, I want to credit the person who sent this to me. It's Matt Park.
Mm-hmm.
He sent this to a bunch of ACC media people and said, "Who do we have to get this off the ground?" He was saying, "Spitballing, cancel the ACC tourney. Congrats FSU for another championship. UVA, you stay
Back to
home
back.
too." Or you can stay home too, or play each other once more for TV and seating.
Yeah.
BC, sorry. Other 12 teams bubble in Greensboro, count off by fours to form 3 pods, play round robin, more data, and still plenty of television. I don't hate that at all.
No, I don't hate that.
And I
I don't
think that
hate
there
that.
are some teams that could probably use that in terms of NCAA tournament hopes. So,
Another thing about another thing about the NCAA tournament, real quick. At some point, we're gonna. I think some people owe ACC coaches an apology for at the beginning of the season when they put out the joint statement that hey, everybody should be invited to the NCAA tournament. It should be like, can you make it? Cool. All right, show on up.
yeah.
Because the way things are going right now, you're going to have teams that theoretically would make the NCAA tournament who might have their own pauses to deal with, including from the ACC. So it's a messy stretch down the season, and we kind of focus talking about this because I'm not quite sure, Brownlow, what you can take away from this game against Northeastern, other than Tyler Hansborough was pretty good.
I was going to say, you also, like Tyler, called them Northwestern.
I did. Well, it's easy to do.
It's
You don't
easy.
spend a lot of time talking about Northeastern, but no, I actually thought Tyler Hansborough did a pretty good job for
Dude,
the first time doing analyst work off a screen.
and like, let me make this clear because I got some pushback from some Carolina people. I think most people understood what I was trying to say. Tyler, for as as great as he was at North Carolina, he just wasn't the most. He didn't always love talking to the media. He had to do it a lot. He was plenty friendly,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't like anything like that. But he just didn't always have a whole lot to say to us. Like it wasn't like he was out there breaking down. Like he broke down a baseline play, a baseline out of bounds play at one point, and was like, "Yeah, that's a play that really works well only against a team that like hasn't scouted us as thoroughly as some others." And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
that's a great freaking tidbit, like that you would never
I mean,
get from a
Lauren,
normal game.
were you that chatty in college?
Um, it depended on the setting, I suppose.
Right.
But yeah, no,
Depends
I
on
mean
the setting. I mean,
everybody's different, and I get
yeah.
it, right? But it's just there are some players that you cover, and you just are like, oh, that guy's absolutely going to be like an analyst or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
he's natural, and he really gets it. I mean, but I would have if you had told me like with the freshman class he came in with, like which one of those guys is like most likely to be a color commentator, I probably would have named literally Marcus Ginyard, Bobby Fraser,
Bobby.
and Danny Green all
Yeah.
ahead of Tyler.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it was cool. It was cool because I was going into it kind of being like, huh, that's weird. Like, didn't expect that.
He's out
And
there.
then,
What is he? He's roasting Walker Kessler at some
oh my
point
god,
too.
he's like, yeah, and he was so like, because he wasn't as funny as when he would do stuff like this. He would unintentionally like destroy another person like with words, and he was like, yeah, this is what happens when you can't find a place to get a haircut around Franklin Street. You learn that as you grow. Like it was kind of like but it was like a dry like sense of
Yeah.
humor thing. But yeah, poor Walker Kessler. I was like, dang, he's just
Yeah.
getting wrecked over his haircut. But yeah, it was yeah, I was surprised, and it was interesting to hear. I'd certainly tune back in to hear him do another game like that because he gave
Yeah.
a lot of really good insight about like what Carolina is trying to do on both ends of the court all the time and things like that play. I mean, it was really interesting and good stuff.
Yeah, for a guy that's nicknamed Psycho T, he was definitely a little bit more chamomile tea when it came to his delivery. But that's why I thought
But
what
he's
he
always
was
that's how
saying.
he's always talked. Like
That's always always yeah, that's how
his
it has
voice
been.
and delivery is still the same. It's just he was like providing a lot
No,
more.
no, I thought it
Like,
was good. I,
yeah.
I actually thought it was good for the first time. So there's potential there for Tyler Hansbrough. And then over to Duke, where they just walloped Wake Forest. Although that game got off the rails when Steve Forbes was ejected with a double technical.
It's kind of already off the rails, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean it was off the rails, but once that happens, it's pretty much a wrap. And I don't know. I didn't watch the Steve Forbes post game. I'm not quite sure. He must have said the magic words to get the double technical like that right out of the gate.
It
But
didn't seem like he really wanted to talk that much about it. He just sort of said, "I'm gonna stick up for my guys" or something
yeah,
along those lines.
yeah, he didn't like the way things were going, and that's fine.
Yeah,
But regardless of how he felt about certain calls or whatever it is, when Duke's shooting like that, when Matthew Hurt is kind of finding his role and Mark Williams continues to develop his role, and things just look like they come a little bit easier. Again, it's just Wake Forest. I understand this, but in games against State and Wake Forest, they've looked more cohesive. In the game against State, Jalen Johnson barely plays. I think he registered, 8 minutes in that game, if I'm not mistaken. And then obviously he opts out this week, so he's not available in this game. And Mark Walker continues or Mark Williams continues to develop into this guy that Coach K keeps talking up and up and up, and it's good to see. And also when Joey Baker's hitting too, it's going to be an easy
yeah,
night. It's going to be an easy night for Duke against Wake in that regard.
yeah. I had that thought when I was like, "Oh, Joey's hitting threes. Now we're done here." Because Joey has basically turned into, the Jack White of this year, where he just couldn't hit anything. But
Mm-hmm.
no, I mean, and the thing is, you're right. They do have more cohesion offensively. I agree. But Duke's issue, I feel like, has always really been its defense, and
They're not going to be.
they're not
They
going to
are.
be an amazing defensive team, but
Yeah.
they're still going to like they made a big point of emphasis correctly on trying to make sure they didn't let Wake get looks from three. That's like the primary threat for Wake's offense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what they did in this game. Like they really emphasized that, and they did a good job of trying to make sure they didn't get anything easy. And I think they're never going to be a dominant defensive team, and that's not
No.
really the point. But they also don't necessarily have to be. I mean, I've said it all year. Like they have enough threats offensively, and they have enough skill offensively
Mm-hmm.
that they'll be fine there. They've had their issues and their ups and downs and their hiccups, obviously, but like their issue to me has and always would be defense because it was just that bad. Like for a Duke team, it was real bad. And it doesn't have to be lockdown for it to be good enough, for them to beat some teams. It just has to be better. And so far it's been better and you've kind of seen the results.
Now, about Jalen Johnson, Mike Krzyzewski was asked about the opting out this week by the freshman. And I know, it caused a lot of eyebrow raising, myself included, because I was confused as to what exactly Jalen Johnson is accomplishing by opting out with 3 weeks left in the season. I'm not quite sure how that helps with NBA scouts to do this, unless NBA scouts and NBA teams are in the mode of we don't care, we get it's a weird season, and if you're concerned with certain things, then by all means, opt out. What I find more interesting is that the way Duke is handling this has been excellent. I mean, from the
Yeah.
statements to the way the players have talked about it to the way Mike Krzyzewski talked about it today, they are basically, I mean, I thought the best thing Mike Krzyzewski said about the whole situation is players should be allowed to do what they want to do. And if he wants to go pro right now, and the way things have gone in a pandemic, he has every right to do so. We support him. We gave him the guidance, and we're moving on. And I was very much impressed by the way Duke's handled all of this.
I could be wrong about this. I've been wrong before, Lord knows. But I think you and I have a good enough sense of Coach K, and plenty of others out there that have covered Duke for some amount of time, that the fact that that Duke put out the statement they did, and then hearing Coach K said what he said, and hearing the guys say what they had to say, but more Coach K, right? The statement Coach K put out, the statement Coach K put out, and what he said tonight. I feel like if there were more to it that Coach K had a problem with, like I know he wants to get NBA ready guys and he doesn't want to like throw a guy under the bus or anything like that.
Oh, there's certainly a business decision aspect of this. I mean,
for sure,
do that sort of thing if you want future guys to come through.
But I also think that Coach K could have handled it the same way, maybe putting out a statement that was a little more tersely worded, maybe saying he didn't want to talk about it. Jalen's gone now and that's okay. Like he made the decision for him or whatever. But like he was fine to talk about it. He didn't mind at all. He put out a statement that was very supportive. So I do get the feeling that like, for whatever reason, and we don't necessarily know the exact reason, but he seems to be, I don't know that there's a lot more extra to this there. Like I think we all want to look at it and go, what's going on? Like what's going on with Jalen Johnson? Like, did he have a bad relationship with Kay? Do they have a problem? I don't get that sense. Do you know what I mean? Like
I'd seen some of those reports that from the national basketball guys that there had been some disagreements with usage between his.
And there may have been.
I'm sure there was, but at some point, I don't know. It's sometimes you can mutually agree to part ways, and it's truly mutual. Like Duke's probably looking at this from the perspective of, all right, you know what? We can make this work without you. And Jalen Johnson's camp can just focus on what they want to do, which is get ready for the pros. And you can put all the statements. I mean, do you roll your eyes when you hear about the brotherhood? And, he's a brother to me, but he just left you guys like that. Like all that kind of stuff, I can understand why you'd look at it a little bit funny. But you also understand, too, that sometimes it's mutual. It's okay.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing that I think it's worth considering from all of us is that, because I've even heard some people say, well, if he didn't want to play anymore this year, I get it, but why didn't he stay in Durham? Which is a fair point,
Yeah, he cleared out his locker and stuff like that, which is, I think it's a fair point too.
But it's also worth remembering, and Kay kind of touched on this during the Jalen Johnson thing, that these guys have been on campus with like just each other essentially for a long time. Yeah. So it would be completely understandable to me too if Jalen Johnson was like, I can't play anymore this year. I want to rest it, and I just want to go see my family and friends. Like that's also a completely understandable sentiment if that's the way that he felt.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. I'll say that we'll talk this weekend, but I mean, I don't know. Do we know what games we're going to talk about this weekend?
Duke, Virginia.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay. All right.
Those teams have been like, well, no, Virginia had a pause, didn't they? I can't keep track of this. I need a chart.
I told you.
I should have made a chart.
It's tough to do. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. We'll talk to you all this weekend.